Good evening. Welcome to Bible study. Um, you can tell that I'm doing a little early because it's pretty sunny behind me. But just wanted to get this so that you can watch this at your leisure. Just a little bit of Bible study together on this evening. I wanted to remind you, or at least just kind of highlight the fact that I hope that some of you are reading the book Draw the Circle and are kind of enjoying that and are getting a lot out of it. And maybe you're kind of pondering your prayer life through that and the things that you pray for, and realize that it's okay to pray for certain things and to pray big, as Mark Batterson would say, that you not only dream big, you pray big. And for the church, we have to do a little bit of both, to kind of have this vision of what God might be doing for us and what God wants for us, especially as our church. And so be thinking about those things as you continue to read the book, and be sure to let me know what your thoughts of as you're doing so. And so, thinking about prayer, let's have a word of prayer. God, we give you thanks for this evening, this time together. We give you thanks for the many blessings you provide for us. We give you thanks for your word and for what it might do for us and how it might edify and build us up. Let us hear the stories of men of faith and how they came to be and how they brought themselves through these particular times. God, we just thank you so much for all you do in Christ's name. Amen. We want to just kind of flash back to what we did last week, where we saw Jacob leaving with his family away from Laban. You know, he'd been working for Laban for quite some time. And now a lot of the things that Laban had eventually accumulated, it sounded like he was not a very good farmer before Jacob came along. And as Jacob came along, he helped to increase what he had. That a lot was accumulated under Jacob when he was there, kind of running the show a little bit. And not only did he accumulate a lot for Laban, but he was able to accumulate a lot for himself in the midst of it. And part of what he decided to do was leave and go on his own with his family. He was a little intimidated by it, so he kind of left in the night, it seems like, or sometime when Laban wouldn't know it, which kind of upset Laban a little bit. And Laban chased him down, and they finally had a confrontation about it all, but and then it sort of settled itself a little bit toward the end, and they established sort of an agreement between themselves. And so that's just sort of a little flashback to what we talked about last week. Now Jacob is on his own now. He's moved. He and his family, Leah, Rachel, he has the servant girls. He has servants, a lot of cows, a lot of goats, sheep, well, those kind of things. And he has the 11 sons and the one daughter, who are all moved away now from where they were. And now we have this interesting story that takes place in chapter 32 and in 33 as well, where we see this meeting again with Esau. Remember when we last were together with Esau and Jacob, it was not a very good time of saying goodbye, because they really didn't. Jacob had stolen the blessing that would have normally gone to the oldest child, who would have been Esau, by tricking his father. And Esau got pretty upset about that and had told offhandedly that, if his father died, that was the end of Jacob. And Rebekah heard that and had sent, Jacob away. And that's when he got in with Laban. And so I'm assuming, and I would think he still kind of feels like that, Esau's got to be still harboring these ill feelings toward me, but I've got to reconcile. I've got to meet him. I've got to at least let him know I'm in the area. And how do I deal with this when he's there? And I've got all this family. I've got all this accumulated wealth, and I don't want to have anything happen to that. And I'm struggling with this promise of God, that I'm to be this caretaker or the one that's going to fulfill this role that was promised to my grandfather and my father of being the having this multitude, that the descendants will be greater than the stars in the sky and all this good stuff. And how do I accomplish that if I'm dead? Which is not going to happen, is it? But let's read anyway. Chapter 32. We'll start at verse 3. And we see here that Jacob is going to kind of see if he can make things just a little easier for himself and kind of appease Esau in some way. So Jacob sends messengers ahead to his brother Esau, who was living in the region of Seir in the land of Edom. And he told him, "Give me this message to my master Esau. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob. Until now I have been living with Uncle Laban, and now I own cattle, donkeys, flocks of sheep, and goats, and many servants, both men and women. I have sent these messengers to inform my lord of my coming, hoping that you will be friendly to me." Sends him this little nice note, a very generous note, just to say to Esau, "I'm here. I want to. I don't want anything happening. I just want you to let you know I'm sending these messengers. Let's see what goes on." I don't know what he thought might happen. I don't know what he thought the response would be. It says, though, in verse 6, that after delivering the message, the messengers returned to Jacob and they reported these words: "We met your brother Esau, and he's already on his way to meet you with an army of 400 men. Okay, how do you think Jacob probably felt to hear that? To hear that, oh, Esau's already on his way, and oh no, he's got 400 men with him. He was ready for a fight. It sounded like he was going to just wipe out Jacob and everything he had, didn't it? It just sounded like he was ready to just accomplish what he wanted to do, and that was get rid of Jacob. How do you think Jacob felt? How would you feel? What do you think? Well, continue to read in verse 7. It says, Jacob was terrified of the news. Well, yes. Remember Esau was a bigger man, a little bit more mighty, stronger. And here's Jacob. He's feared. And so what he develops this little plan. He says he divides his household along with the flocks and herds and camels into two groups. For he thought if Esau meets one group and he attacks it, perhaps the other group can escape. One group, you could be done. The other group, hopefully, out of there. Jacob, I would suspect, is at the back of both groups. I don't know. But one way or another, he was trying to figure out ways that he could avoid what Esau's wrath might be. So Jacob goes to God and goes to God with a word of prayer. He says, "Oh God, my grandfather Abraham and my God of my father Isaac. Oh Lord, you told me." He's saying this. He said, "God, you told me. You said this to me. That you are the one who gave me this time. Return to your own land and your own relatives. And you promised me," Jacob says, "I will treat you kindly. I am not worthy of all the unfailing love and faithfulness you have shown to me, your servant. When I left home and across the Jordan River, I owned nothing except a walking stick. Now my household fills with two large camps. Oh Lord, please rescue me from the hand of my brother Esau." He's going to God and saying, Esau wants to kill me. He doesn't know why Esau's coming. He hasn't had a response from Esau. He doesn't even know what his reaction is going to be. But he's already going to God and say, "Please don't let Esau do anything to me, because I know he's going to come harm me. I am afraid that he's coming to attack me along with my wives and children. But you promised me, I will surely treat you with kindly, and I will multiply your descendants." Remember, he's kind of bringing this back to God. will multiply your descendants until they become as numerous as the sands along the seashore, too many to count. So he's bringing all this stuff up to God and says, God, you told me to do all this. Now you need to help me get out of this. Do we ever do that in our prayers? Do we ever say to God, this is what you wanted, and you've got to help me? And we do trust God, and that's what Jacob does. But it seems like he's trying to demand to God to say, this is all you're doing. In a way, saying, this is your fault. And you need to do something. When acts of prayer are about faith, aren't they? Which means that not only do we trust God, but we also are willing to do something ourselves. So what does he need to do? Well, one of the things he does, it says, Jacob stayed where he was for the night, and then he selected these gifts from his possessions to present to his brother Esau. He's going to give him gifts, sort of tribute, something to kind of appease him in some way. So it says he gave him 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 female camels and their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He divided these animals into herds and assigned each to different servants. And then he told his servants, go ahead of me with the animals, but keep some distance between the herds. He gave them these instructions to the men leading the first group. When my brother Esau meets you, he will ask, whose servant are you? Where are you going? Who owns these animals? And you must reply that they belong to your servant Jacob, but they are a gift for his master Esau. Look, he is coming right behind us. As a reminder to them to say, Jacob's back there. Here's these things for you. Can you be nice to him? Jacob gave some instructions to the second and third herdsmen and to all who follow behind those herds. You must say the same thing to Esau when you meet him, and be sure to say, look, your servant Jacob is right behind you. And it's going to be a long ways back because, he's already got one group, two groups, three groups. And, he's kind of in a good spot for himself. Jacob thought, I will try to appease him by sending gifts ahead of me. And when I see him in person, perhaps he will be friendly to me. So the gifts were sent on ahead while Jacob spent the night by himself in the camp. So we're going to go to his night dream, but just remember that all his stuff, his gifts, and the things he wants to give to Esau are now moving ahead. And Jacob's going to kind of rest for the moment. He's going to spend the night there and kind of wait and see what's going to happen or progress as he's spending the night by himself. So in verse 22 and to the end of chapter 32, we see that familiar story that we always think about with Jacob and his wrestling with God. Wrestling, depends on where you're from. But he has this encounter with God. And it's an encounter that kind of changes who Jacob is. It changes who he is. It changes his name. It changes a lot about this calling that he has already received, but it's somewhat of a reminder to him as he wrestles with God. So in verse 22, during the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 servant wives, his 11 sons, and he crossed the Jabbok River with them. After taking them to the other side, he sent over all his possessions. Then this left Jacob all alone in the camp. And a man came and wrestled with him until dawn began to break. And if we're thinking about from sundown to sunset, sunset to sunrise, sundown to sunrise, that's a long time that he was doing this, wasn't it? When the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of its socket. And the man said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. Broke Jacob's hip, moved it out of his socket. Can you imagine the painfulness of what that must be? Jacob says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Jacob knew who this was, didn't he? Or at least he seemed to in his dream. But he still wrestled with him anyway. Jacob says, you bless me. And the man said, what's your name? And he says, Jacob. And the man told him, you will no longer be Jacob. From now on, you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won. You fought with God and with men and have won. So now your name is Israel. You've shown this strength. You have shown this courage. A courage, and I think that's what's going to draw him to go ahead and meet with his brother, is to realize that he does have this strength. He does have this moxie about him, that he can trust God, that he does have this faith. Now, it's interesting because sometimes we'll hear Jacob, sometimes we'll hear Israel later, but we know where all this is going to go. Please tell me your name, Jacob said. Why do you want to know my name? The man replied, and then he blessed Jacob there. Jacob named the place Peniel, which means the face of God, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared. He was wrestling with God, wasn't he? It doesn't tell us if it's this figurative battle that these two had, or if it's something that's more spiritual within his mind, although the hip is going to feel real, as we're going to see in a little bit. When it says, as the sun was rising, Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. Even today, it says the people of Israel don't eat the tendon near the hip socket because of what had happened that night when the man strained the tendon of Jacob's hip. Isn't it interesting that they kind of commemorate, in a sense, this particular text, this incident, by not eating that part of the flesh, of the body of the animal, because of what it reminds them of. It reminds them of this story where Jacob, their forefather, the one that helped to establish who they were, had this nightly encounter with God where they struggled with one another, and then Jacob was renamed. And so there's this incident there that I think it kind of formulates to, or gives this message to Jacob, that nothing's going to happen to him, that God will be with him. Because why would God rename him? Why would God give him this persona? And why would God do this if he didn't have some intention for him to carry on and to be who he is and what he is to become as the father of many nations? So we move to chapter 33, and here we're going to see that the meeting happens between Jacob and Esau. And as we know, it's not going to be the way that Jacob had envisioned it at first, is it? Then Jacob looked up, and he saw Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and his 2 servant wives. He put the servant wives and their children at the front, Leah and her children next, and then Rachel and Joseph last. And you know, it's the difficult thing, because it reminds us of where the hierarchy of these women might reside in the life of Jacob. That servant girls are servant girls, servant wives. Not saying, be careful with how you translate that or look at it, but they would have been seen very differently from his other wives. And then especially you see the difference between Leah and Rachel. Leah is the one that gave him the most children, but we always know that Rachel is the one that he loved the most of the 2 wives and then the servant wives. So she gets to be last, with Joseph last. Then Jacob went on ahead, so he did go ahead of him. As he approached his brother, he bowed to the ground. Look at that. He bowed to the ground 7 times before him. But what does Esau do? In verse 4, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they both wept. Oh, what a beautiful story. Reminds me a little bit of the prodigal son, doesn't you? That there was this return, even though it's different, but yet it still has this connotation of it's not. Remember, the brother wasn't sure what to expect when he came back to his father. He thought, I'm just going to tell him I need to be a servant. I'm not worthy to be your son anymore. And the father accepted him right away, and he ran and he greeted him and he kissed him and he hugged him. And here's the same sort of incident in a way that we see this Jacob, who'd been so deceitful to his brother, gained the most out of it, tricked him, was fearful of him, sent gifts ahead, sent stuff ahead to kind of, soften him up a little bit. But Esau was ready to forgive. Esau was okay with it all. He ran, embraced him, kissed him, and they both wept, it says. Esau looked at the women and children, and he asked, "Who are these people with you?" To which Jacob says, "These are the children God has graciously given to me, your servant." Then the servant wives came forward with their children and bowed to him. Next came Leah and her children, and they bowed before him. Finally, Joseph and Rachel came and bowed before him. And then Esau asked, "And where were all the flocks and herd I met as I came?" "My brother, I have plenty." Jacob says, "They are a gift, my lord, to ensure your friendship." Friendship? We're brothers. It's not a friendship. How does Esau reply? Does Esau reply, "Okay, I'll take them. I could use some of these things. I appreciate what you've done," and then you're okay. We're off the hook. Esau says this, though. He says, "My brother, I have plenty. Keep what you have for yourself." Esau, remember, did receive a small blessing. And he's gone off, becoming his own man, and he's accumulated his own wealth. Jacob should have known that when he knew he had 400 men with him. But he had accumulated his own wealth. He was doing okay. So he says, "Jacob, you take that stuff. I don't need it. It's yours. I've got everything I need." Jacob insisted, "No, if I have found favor with you, please accept this gift from me. And what a relief to see your friendly smile. It's like seeing the face of God. Please take this gift I have brought you, for God has been very gracious to me, and I have more than enough." And because Jacob insisted, Esau finally accepted the gift. He did take it because it was probably the more honorable thing to do, even though he realized that he didn't need it. But the insistence of Jacob kind of caused him to want to go ahead and do it. "Well, let's get going. I'll lead the way," Esau says. But Jacob replied, "You can see, my lord, that some of the children are very young, and the flocks and herds are very young too. If they are driven too hard, even for one day, all the animals could die. Please, my lord, go ahead of your servant, and we will follow slowly at a pace that is comfortable for the livestock and the children. I will meet you at Seir." To which Esau says, "That's fine, but at least let me assign some of my men to guide and to protect you." Sort of a generous thing for him to do because he wants to ensure that their safety as they travel. To which Jacob responds, "That's not necessary. It's enough that you've received me warmly, my lord." One thing is, I think that Jacob now realizes after this meeting with God that God is with him and he can trust him. He has faith in him, and he knows that where he goes, he's protected. And he doesn't need these men. So Esau turned around and started back to Seir that same day. Jacob, on the other hand, traveled on to Succoth. There he built himself a house and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place was named Succoth, which means shelters. Later, having traveled all the way from Padan Aram, Jacob arrived safely at the town of Shechem in the land of Canaan. There he set up camp outside the town. Jacob bought a plot of land where he camped from the family of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for the 100 pieces of silver. And there he built an altar and named it El Eleh Israel. It's his name. It's interesting he didn't go and stay with Esau, isn't it? I think he still kind of feared what could happen. And I think he just wanted to go. I think he was just ready. He just needed to have this moment with Esau to know that things were okay. And now he's moved on. He's established this place, and so there he is. So I'm going to stop there, and we'll look again next week at some more scripture. Continue to be thinking about the scriptures as you are in your time of study. Continue to read in the book of Genesis as we continue on. We have a few more chapters to go. We still have to get to Joseph a little bit, but continue to be praying, continue to be thinking about what God's calling for you and what is the calling for the church, especially in this season that we're in. Be thankful and be blessed. Grace, thank you, and blessings.